And we are doing our continuation of the differential focus. Last night's Thursday class was all about the differential as well. So tonight we're continuing our differential focus, and it's going to have some build training, and we are, excuse me, adding in some mechanical and tech with it. Excuse me, ladies, I've had the crud. So first, I want to start with saying to every one of you ladies on here with me, Happy International Women's Day. I heard an announcement for it on the radio. I've seen it on social media. So today is in celebration of International Women's Day. So happy International Women's Day to all of our ladies, everyone who is on here watching with us. I know we have some ladies who are international that are in the group with us, which is so exciting. So I felt like it was very fitting to wish everybody an amazing International Women's Day. And also Amanda Nicole and Chelsea Harrison are our amazing Lady Jeepers in our picture. Excuse me, I am so sorry. So I am just happy that we can share this day together. And I wanted to start with a quote, especially where today is International Women's Day. And I want to share with you a quote that really kind of struck home with me. And it's, the strongest actions for a woman is to love herself, be herself, and shine amongst those who never believed she could. And I believe that all of us have come together in our group and really are working on living this, working on, being our strongest version of ourselves, loving ourselves, being able to be ourselves and really shine. So I wanted to start tonight with this quote, ladies, for everybody. So this week has been focused on differentials. Last night we talked about the inside of the differential on a 14-bolt, 1-ton axle with a spooled differential, so it is locked all the time, and it looks a little bit different than some of the other differentials out there. But you got to take a look inside and see, maybe something that's a little bit different. Even if you are not ever thinking you're going to do a 1-ton, my JKU is not going to be tonned. It's not going to go to the 1-ton as my daily driver. But, it's really neat to be able to see different modifications, different builds, and see things that are different so you can learn and understand what different axles look like, different differentials inside different axles look like. So last night was a quick tour of that 14-bolt rear end. So that's what makes it a 1-ton. So it's a different axle. So inside of the axle itself, the differential is going to look a little bit different as well when you're talking about a 1-ton axle. So it's a spooled differential, which means it is always locked. So that means that it does not have the spider gears or lockers. So when you took the tour last night, you saw that it has the ring and pinion gear. So the ring gear, which is the big gear that was in the front, and it has the pinion gear that comes in the back to meet up with that big ring gear. So the ring gear was very easy to see in the video last night just because of how it sat with the differential off. So this was harder to see because this is actually coming in the front. But I just wanted to kind of quickly go over this tonight. So we're kind of doing a recap. But so when you were looking at that 14-bolt, 1-ton rear end axle, you noticed that because it's a spooled axle, because it's locked all the time, you did not have the spider gears in there, which you would have that we talked about a little bit further down the line in the video. But so in the actual 14-bolt, the spooled differential, there was not the spider gears inside of it. You saw the big gear that was facing you, which is your ring gear. And then you saw that there was really not really a lot of anything else in there. Now, it still had, the axle shafts, still had the axle housing, it still had those bearings that come in. So it still had that, but the difference, and it still had the ring gear and the pinion gear, but it didn't have all of this, which then we kind of moved into. So a quick overview of the inside of the differential. As you can see, ladies, I have been working away on new training stuff and graphics and some amazing downloads, some things that are coming. But so I wanted to do a quick overview of the inside of the differential. So when you take off your diff cover on your Jeep, what you're going to see is going to look differently on the inside than what you saw in the overview, the tour last night, because when you take off your differential cover, you're going to notice, so you're still going to have your big ring gear, you're still going to have your pinion gear, and then you're still going to have where your axle house comes in, the axle housing, which is what protects your axle shaft. But the difference is when you look here in this example, you're going to see it looks like what is a bunch of teeth. There's like, you know, it's like, man, look, there's a whole bunch of different teeth that are meeting up right there in the middle. And so this is going to be your differential side gear, which is going to be there, which is what kind of comes in from the axle shaft on both sides. And then you're going to notice that it's going to have the spider gears, which are going to be on top of, so you have the two that come in, and then they're going to be on top of each other. So when we moved in last night and started talking about like the limited slip differential in your axle, that was what we were talking about right here, so that you had your side gear and your spider gear. So it was a little bit different. So this is a limited slip differential in your axle. So if you have a limited slip differential, it is different than a locker. It is set up differently inside. So I'm going to jump back really quickly. So I'm talking about in here, this is what's going to be different in your differential, what gears you're going to have. This is all going to be dependent on how you're set up in there. So we started talking about the limited slip, which is different because it comes with a preloaded spring pack, which is actually in that center, so that you have, that is what is going to determine your differential, how it works, how it functions. And so we talked about that last night. So if you missed that training, go ahead and jump back in, watch yesterday's training video where I really go in depth and we talk about the different differentials. So the limited slip differential, we talk about that preloaded spring pack, how that works, what that means. And then we also talked about lockers. And so we talked about like this, for example, you know, is a different setup. So we kind of covered that last night as well, talking about like the lunchbox locker, the limited slip differentials, how those work, what triggers what, you know, how things lock, how they close, where the pressure goes for the limited slip. If you missed any of that, jump back over to last night's training and get caught up. I mean, you can do that after tonight's class because we're not going to go into all of the same stuff again, because tonight I want to jump in and get started with a build modification upgrade for your differential. So an upgraded aftermarket differential cover, and I talked about this super quickly in Monday's quick tip video, but I wanted to go back over this tonight as well. So we're going to be talking about an upgrade that you can make. So why are you going to upgrade your differential cover? So there's a couple different reasons why you want to upgrade this diff cover. So one of them, of course, is for strength. You want to have added strength there for protection so that you're going to have something that is meant to take and will take a little bit more of an impact. So you're going to have a modified aftermarket differential cover, which is going to go right here. And the reasoning for that being, I know we have talked about this a couple different times. I know we talked about it when we did our off-road driving tip, talking about knowing where your differential is, how important that is. And the reason being, and this is the exact same reason when we're talking about doing an upgraded differential cover, is because as you can see, and this is a big Jeep. So I wanted to share this picture with you because I felt like it was a good example. So this is a big Jeep. This Jeep is on 42-inch tires. So, you know, this has a big tire, which is going to give it the most ground clearance that you can. in the build, because remember, your ground clearance is not going to come from your lift and from your suspension lift right here. Yes, that is going to help because you can put a bigger tire. So when you put the bigger tire, that is what is going to, if you put it here versus here, that's what is going to give you your ground clearance. So I wanted you to see this example because this is actually out on a trail. This is, again, a 42-inch tire, so you have a lot of ground clearance based on the size tire that you're running. And as you can see, the differential is always going to be my lowest point on this particular build and setup. We could go into, and we will, there are a couple different setups, different builds that you can make where it is going to change, that your differential is not going to be your lowest point, but those are going to hold different builds. Those are when you move into off-road vehicles and rigs kind of only, when you start going to like the 2.5 ton axles, if you go to like the Rockwells, it changes your setup, but that is a very specific build. So what we're talking about is for 90% of your builds, we'll be realistic. Most of us are going to be doing a kind of simple build, or I guess no builds are simple, but we're going to be doing something that is going to be functioning as our daily driver as well, not just a trail rig specific vehicle. But so as you can see, and this is a good example because this is, a good sized rock that's coming up ahead of me. As you can see the ground clearance here, even with a 42-inch tire, this is always my lowest point. So you can see like there's rocks. So this was a rock garden. So there's all different size rocks in here that I'm driving over. But so this is my lowest point. So by doing an upgraded differential cover, you're getting a little extra protection so that if you do end up taking some hits to that diff cover, because it's going to be your lowest point of impact. So you want to kind of take care of that because that's going to be your not necessarily weakest point, but it is going to be your most vulnerable point on your Jeep. So you're getting the protection and the strength, but you're also, by doing this upgrade, going to be getting just a little bit extra ground clearance. And that is because this is now going to be shaved. So it's going to give me just a little bit more ground clearance when this new differential cover goes on, this upgraded one. So I'm getting added strength, and I'm also going to be getting a little more ground clearance because of the shaved differential. So that is the why you want to be doing it. And then what we are going to be doing is the what is, this is a moto built differential cover. So this is an upgraded moto built diff cover that you can buy. And I know I said this last time I showed it to you too, but the welds and the actual work on this diff cover is beautiful. It's very heavy, lots of added protection. And then I'm going to get that little bit of extra ground clearance. Don't have to go with moto built. This is just what I went with. So I wanted to show you. So this is what the aftermarket diff cover is. And then the exciting part is, so the how is coming next to show you the actual upgrade on the build. So keep watching our Friday training. We have more and more coming up. So before we jump into our mechanical and tech part tonight, I just wanted to show you a quick example of knowing your particular differential based on your axle, because every axle has a little bit different differential, and you're going to notice their diff cover is different. This is where knowing your particular vehicle, knowing your particular Jeep is really going to be important, because if you do want to get an upgraded diff cover, you need to know what axle you are running, because again, look at how different every differential, so every diff cover is going to be. Some of them are slight, as you can see here when you get to the, the Dana 60, Dana 70, and Dana 80, they're still the same shape, but the size is different. And look at the difference between your Dana 35 and your Dana 44, big difference there. So it's knowing what axle that you're running, so you know what diff cover you're running, so then you're going to know what you're going to want to upgrade to and what you're going to want to replace it with. And the neat thing is, if this is something that you really want to focus on, it's kind of neat to learn the actual look of the different differential covers, and how every axle has a different differential, so that if you're looking underneath a Jeep and you see the differential, you can start to say, oh, that's a Dana 35, that's a Dana 44, that's a Dana 60, that's a 14 bolt. You can see the difference based on the shape. So your most common are going to be, your Dana 35, your Dana 44, your Dana 60, and then an upgraded like 14 bolt. Those are kind of the most popular that you're going to see. Like if you're at an event, you're kind of looking underneath like the front and the rear of different Jeeps as you go by. Those are going to be what you're going to see the most. But I thought that was really neat to see how different axles have different differentials, so different differential covers. So now let's jump in for part 1 of our mechanical and tech tonight. And this is part 1 of flushing your differential. So what you're going to need before you start. So what I like to do is make sure that you have all the things that you're going to need before you get started. So you kind of take everything, we have like a shelf, a bench that is right next to the Jeep in the garage. So you get everything that you're going to need, put it together, so that way you know you have everything before you get started. So what you're going to need before you start. So over here on the left, so what you're going to need is a gasket maker. And we're going to talk about this in depth in part 2. They do make rubber seals, rubber gaskets that you can use with your differential and your differential cover. But if you're going to be doing a lot of off-road driving where you're going to have a lot of water crossings, you're going to be in a lot of mud, where you feel like you're going to be flushing your diff frequently, those rubber seals don't always reseal great. This is, again, the brutal honesty of kind of being out there and doing something. So they're going to say those seals and those gaskets are going to work, that you can use them and you can reuse them, 1 or 2 times before you have to buy a new one, and that you can just buy a new rubber seal and gasket that is going to go on for your diff, which is great. But reality is, we have had a lot of issues with those pre-made rubber gaskets that you can buy not sealing correctly, after some time breaking down, the seal not being great, and then you have a leak. And the one thing, you definitely want to be taking care of is your diff, because there's so many important parts, so many little, teeth in there. You want to make sure that you have a good seal so that you're not leaking, because if you're leaking diff fluid, that means it's slowly draining out of the differential, and you don't want to run it without differential fluid in there. So what we do, and again, we're going to go into this in depth in part 2, is we actually use a gasket maker. We're going to show you how to do that. We use gray just because we have the aluminum. So it matches. Now, if you have painted your differential and differential cover, if you've painted your undercarriage, you can try to get something that's going to color match a little bit better. You don't have every color in the world choice. So if you went kind of specific with the color of like your diff cover, if you had it kind of custom painted, you can get close, but it's not going to be identical. So we do gray, just that way, since we have the aluminum, and you don't really see it, because it needs to seal, needs to be inside, in between your diff cover, and your plate when you put it on to seal it. Then the other thing you're going to need is your oil, gear oil. So we use Royal Purple, and of course it's the 75W90. Then the other thing is brake cleaner. And any kind of just generic brake cleaner, like this actually is just an AutoZone bottle of brake cleaner, but you're gonna want a couple bottles of brake cleaner as well. And then one of the most important things is you want to make sure before you start that you have a catch pan. They make different kinds. They make, like, this is a plastic one. It works really well. It doesn't make a mess. It has lots of room, so it's a bigger one. These are great. I know they make metal ones. You can use different pans, different things. I like this because it has like the lid on it. The ones that are just like the pan, I feel like you have a higher risk of spilling it when you go to move it. So this is what I do recommend. But again, you can use anything, whatever works for you, whatever you want to use. Make sure you have that catch pan. Make sure that if you have used it for an oil change, if you've used it to flush your diff before, whatever it may be, make sure that you have recycled the fluid out of this. And that is something to remember before you get started. Make sure this is empty, because what you don't want to do is already have like oil from an oil change in there. Then you drop your diff cover, everything starts to drain, you have diff fluid running in there, and then all of a sudden it overfills and you make a huge mess. So this is again about being prepared ahead of time. So make sure that you have an empty catch pan for you to drain into. And then I always like to have like an old rag or a towel, because no matter how careful you are, there's going to be a little bit of a mess, whether it be on your hands, whether it be trying to wipe anything that spills, whatever it may be. And then also, this is the point, if you want to wear like rubber gloves to keep everything off of your hands, make sure you have those before you get started, because you want to put those on from the very beginning. You don't want to wait. Otherwise, it's pointless to put those on. So what I'm going to do is jump in here, and we're going to move into, this is part 1, and this is going to be actually changing fluid. So another thing that you want to think about, sorry about that, it's jumping all over the place. All right. So another thing you want to think about is, depending on if you have your stock factory differential cover, if you have changed out your axles so that you have a different diff, if you have put on an aftermarket diff cover already, it's going to come with its own bolts. So that is something you want to make sure that you find the right Allen wrench. Some of the new ones will come with their own kind of Allen key that fit the bolts that come with the upgraded differential cover. So you want to make sure that you have the right tool to remove all of the nuts. And that's something you're going to start with, is go ahead and you're going to remove every single one from your diff cover. And what you're going to notice is, as you start to remove, especially the bottom ones, you're going to notice it's going to start to drain just a little bit. And I wanted to point out too, as you can see in this video, we were already starting to have a little bit of a leak. So as you can see, there's diff fluid that is already leaking just a little bit. And so that is part of what prompted that we needed to go ahead and flush the differential, and we needed to go ahead and reseal it. And we're also going to show you, this isn't just about draining. We're going to show you how we flush the actual differential before we refill it, because you want to make sure everything is clean. Again, especially if you're doing water crossings and mud, you want to make sure anything that could have gotten in there is going to be clean before you put new fluid in there. So first of all, you're going to start with, make sure you have the right tool. You're going to go through it and you're going to remove every single one of those bolts as you go from your differential cover. And I will share with you, so this one, because it had taken some impact, actually had a couple of the bolts at the bottom that were bent. So before you get started, look and see if there's any damage to the differential cover and any of the bolts as you're going to be having to remove them, so that you know ahead of time if you're going to have any problems and if you're going to have to do any modifications to the bolts to be able to get them off as well. So as you start to remove all of the bolts, go ahead and allow some of that fluid to drain from the differential before you just pull the cover off. So like as you can see, there's already differential fluid that was coming out even without the cover off. So once all the bolts are removed, go ahead and let that, you're going to see it's going to be dripping. There's going to be differential fluid coming out. Go ahead and let that drain for a second before you just pull the cover off. I am being overly cautious about being careful, not making a mess. And to me, the best process to do this, can you just pull it off? Yes. I like for it to drain and start to slow down a little bit before I pull the cover off. Again, just because I don't want to make a mess. So I'm being honest with you. This is my actual process here. So then you're going to pull the actual differential cover off. And once you pull, sorry, ladies. I'm having some technical difficulties tonight. I apologize. So once you actually pull the differential cover off, then you're going to notice that it is going to be draining, and you want to allow it to drain. That's a big thing. So don't just pull the cover off and then go right away to start cleaning it, or thinking that, you know, this is going to be like a 10-minute job. This is something that you want to make sure to allow all that fluid to drain, because there's going to be fluid inside. So once you pull the cover off, I would say walk away. Let that drain for at least 10 or 15 minutes before you go back in and you start to flush and clean it, so that way you're allowing gravity to kind of take over and give it the time for everything to drain out and into your catch pan before you go in and you try to start cleaning it. This is something, as we start talking about the mechanical and tech side, you know, I know some people are like, oh, you can do a 15-minute oil change, or, you know, how to do a 15-minute oil change at home. That's great. That's awesome. But my outlook is allow a little bit more time. Don't ever be rushed, you know, or get, you know, say, oh, I only have a 30-minute time frame. I'm going to go ahead and change my oil, or I'm going to go ahead and change out my differential fluid. Always make sure that you have allotted yourself a bigger amount of time, and take that little bit of extra time to allow for things to go a little bit slower, because there's no rush. I would rather pull that differential cover off, walk away 10 or 15 minutes, let it drain, you know, let it kind of start to dry out inside, and then come back and go ahead and flush and clean it, than trying to rush and do it all at once. Again, can you? Yes, you can go ahead and jump in and just do it. I'm just sharing with you my process. And again, I'm sharing with you my process because I'm a little more kind of overly cautious, and I'm overly cautious about the actual parts of my Jeep, the processes of things that I do when it's the mechanical and tech of my Jeep, but then also about not making a huge mess, because things can be messy. So you want to let it drain all the way. Oh my goodness. I am so sorry, ladies. I was trying to do it the easiest way possible tonight, so I apologize. All right, so then what you're going to do, once you have let it drain, again, I say for 10 or 15 minutes, then you're going to go ahead, and as you can see, this is just a kind of not knockoff, but this is just kind of whatever kind of cheaper store brake cleaner you can get. So like this is just the AutoZone brand of brake cleaner. And what that is going to do is that is going to help to actually clean and flush inside of your differential. So that way what you're doing is you're not just pulling off your diff cover and allowing whatever fluid wants to drain out, then sealing it back up and putting new fluid in, because you're going to have remnants, you're going to have parts left over, like little pieces from what was in there. You know, even if you let it drain, there's still going to be a little bit left over, some residue. Not everything is going to drain out on its own. So this is how you want to flush your differential and clean it before you seal it back up and refill. So again, any kind of brake cleaner. And this is something, as you're using this, like you can see it's still dripping, it's still draining, but as you're using this, you want to start on one side at the top. So think about that. Start at the top and work your way down as you're spraying your brake cleaner. The reason being, as you start at the top, it's going to start to drip down. So you always want to be thinking about start at the top to let everything come down, and then it's going to flush out the bottom when you start spraying the bottom out with the brake cleaner. So things start at the top, and make sure you take the time to really spray and get into all of kind of the cracks, the crevices, the teeth. You want to make sure you're trying to get as much of that residue, any residual fluid, if you had gone through mud, any mud that may have made its way in there. And then we are going to jump in and do part 2 next week. So part 1 is flushing, is actually removing the diff cover, flushing and cleaning out the inside of your differential, making sure you use your brake cleaner, making sure it's clean. And then I recommend, again, me being cautious, leave your differential cover off for at least a couple hours. And go ahead and let everything dry. And that way, when you come back, you're going to have a little bit cleaner, drier space inside when you go to reseal, to create your seal, to put your differential cover back on. So again, this is where I say, can you do this in 20 minutes? Yes, you can. Is there a process that might take a little bit longer, but that I recommend? Yes. So this is me being thorough. So think about, once you have sprayed your brake cleaner, you feel like you've gotten in everywhere so that you've gotten as much of the fluid and buildup from whatever happened to be kind of stuck in that differential out, then keep that diff cover off and come back in an hour and then go ahead and finish. And that's why we're doing it in a couple parts, because then we'll come back and we'll do part 2, which is going to be to seal and to then refill your differential. And I do want to share with you, there are different ways and processes to go ahead and, and drain and clean and refill your differential. I personally don't just pull the plug and let all the fluid drain out. I like to remove all the bolts and actually pull the differential off and let everything drain. Now, can you pull your plug? Can you let your fluid drain out and then take your differential off? Yes, you can. Again, there's multiple ways that you can do this. I'm just sharing with you our best practices that we use from having to do this quite a bit, because I will tell you, we do ride at a place where we have to do multiple water crossings. So because of that, when we really start riding for the year, if we go on multiple rides, and especially we've had so much rain, there's been so much water everywhere and so much mud. This is something that we have to keep up with pretty frequently. So this is kind of our best practices and the way that we choose to do it. Will other mechanics tell you, go ahead, pull the plug, let it drain, then go ahead and pull your differential off? Yes, and you can do it that way as well. So I just wanted to give you our kind of way of doing things, what we have found works great for us, in our process. And like I said, it's a little different. I like to allow a little bit more time, let it drain a little bit longer before you start to flush and clean it. And go ahead, leave the diff cover off. Go ahead and wait just an hour or so. So my process is probably a little bit longer, but again, this is the way that I like to do it, and I want to share it with you. So I'm excited to be moving into this mechanical and tech section with you ladies. So much to share, and I'm so excited. So I want you to go ahead and make sure you mark your calendar for next Friday. It's 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, because we're going to continue, and there's going to be more differential training. with our Friday classes that will be coming up. And we're going to move into part 2, which is going to be creating your seal, refilling your differential. And I'm trying to break these into kind of a little bit shorter classes so that we're giving you a piece, and that way you can watch this again if you want to, work on that one piece, and then we're going to give you the second piece. That way I feel like it's a little bit easier to take in. And also that way I'm not keeping you here for forever on a Friday night. And keep an eye out for some things we have coming up. And I know I will see you again really soon live. So have a wonderful Friday, ladies. Happy Jeep End. And I hope you are going out to do something amazing for you and you enjoy your weekend. So have an amazing Jeep End. Thank you for being here again. And don't forget, happy International Women's Day. So take a moment, feel your power, feel yourself, love yourself, and be yourself. So I'll see you ladies soon. Have a great night. Bye, ladies.